Hello and welcome to another episode of Real PR. Today with me, Lauren Roberts. I'm joined by a guest today that I know quite well but haven't met in person. And I'm going to let Lewis introduce himself. We're going to speak everything about business, visibility, and all things in between.
Hi, I'm Lewis. I'm one of the founders with my wife of the Oliver Sleeper Foundation. We started the foundation back in February 2023 after the unfortunate death of my son Oliver, who died from choking in a nursery here over in Ashford in Kent. So.
And do you want to start off just by, obviously I know a fair bit about you and the charity and Ollie, so just for our listeners who don't know, do you want to tell us a little bit about Ollie and the charity itself?
Yeah, so Ollie was 9 months old. He went to nursery as a fit and healthy young baby. We had to put him into nursery because it was the almost the done thing. Both got to work,
Yeah.
and we had to, we had to get him into childcare. So he went to nursery on that day, fine and healthy. And then we got a call at about 10:30 in the morning saying. Oliver was fine. He's had a bit of an instant choking whilst having his breakfast or having his dinner. It was an early dinner, and they said, "Well, we've called the paramedics. That, yeah, but he's okay. Um, can you come down? No sense of urgency whatsoever." And Zoe arrived at the nursery, and the ambulance was actually running out doing CPR whilst they were running. And he was taken up to the local hospital. And again, we just assumed it was all an accident at the time, and there was nothing untoward, etc. And 5 days later, that same day, in fact, we were transferred to London. We was both told we couldn't go with him because of COVID, which I politely
Mm.
raged about to the poor ambulance driver, and he said, get in effectively, because they told us he wouldn't survive the journey over to London because the ambulance doesn't have all the necessary equipment. We couldn't go on a helicopter because that didn't have the equipment, although that would have been the fastest resource. As it was, the ambulance came from the Evelina, which was part of the St John's transfer crew there. They picked us up. We managed to obviously get in the ambulance in the end, and we had the hour's journey over to London. He did survive the journey, but the damage was already done, at the nursery through everything that happened there. So it lasted another 5 days, and then they told us literally from getting in the Evelina, he's not going to survive. There's zero chance of survival. But we clung on to whatever hope we had in the fact that miracles do happen. Neither of us are religious people, but in some weird kind of way we became in that week, because you just
Mhm.
cling on to every little bit of hope. But he'd been without oxygen for well over 90 minutes. So the brain damage was just catastrophic. But we had to wait that time for them to do their tests, and to gather what then became evidence,
Mhm.
in terms of getting the food that was in his lungs. They did 2 bronchoscopies on him, and not, they were sucking bits of pasta out of his lungs where food should never ever have been. There was that much food in him. So obviously we then made the decision to meet with the professionals. So they made the decision for us, and said, look, tomorrow morning is going to be, he can't sustain life on his own. They tried turning the ventilator off. They tried, lowering everything, but it was clear he wasn't going to sustain it. And then it was a case of, we went into that meeting. They brought people from King's College who were the neurological experts and the brain experts, and they said, the damage is too much. There is no life left. So the next day we had to make the decision. It was a unanimous decision. The decision was made for us. It wasn't even us that made the decision. They couldn't sustain it any longer, and it was time to let go. So we made that decision. And agreed with them. And yeah, the next morning, we had to let him go. But off the back of that, he did a wonderful thing, and I don't mind telling the story because it's nice and short. But I'm not one for shouting at women or anything like that, but a little lady came and sat on the bed next to us that night and said, "Mr. Steeper, have you ever considered organ donation?" And I went nuts because I thought, what a time to ask me
Yeah.
in my worst time of my life about donating organs. I thought, you've got me in a corner here. And
Yeah.
she said, "No, not you, Mr. Steeper, Oliver." I was like, "What?
Oh,
You're kidding me?" And she said, "No, we have to go to the coroner, we have to go to the police because obviously it's now an investigation and everything." But they agreed they could take his kidneys and his liver. Everything else had to stay. So we looked at I looked at Zoe across the room and she looked at me and instantly we just said yes. Yeah, if we can help save, or if Oliver can help save
yeah.
another life, then let's do it. Amazing. And we agreed to that. So that kind of gave us another few hours because I didn't realize at the time that they'd found a donor for his kidneys. He was in the northeast somewhere, and they actually flew a helicopter, a surgical team from Leeds down to London to perform this operation. And they said, it's quite traumatic for us as parents because
Hmm.
when the end does come in terms of letting him go, they're so quick to then remove him from us because the quicker they get the organs out, the better it is for the other person. So we was prepared for that, and we did. And the time came, and they warned us. Some babies can live without because they once the body's in a rhythm, he could live for up to 3 or 4 days potentially. But as it was about 13 minutes and he dropped. We became quite accustomed to looking at the monitors and
Yeah.
everything, and we knew what was going on, and we knew he was going quite quick, and then he passed, and literally it was like we got 1 minute, and then this woman grabbed Ollie and literally ran like I've never seen like Liverpool like you did on the marathon.
Maybe not
Yeah.
quite that quick.
No, and then they took his liver and they took his kidneys, and then they brought him back, and then we was able to say a proper goodbye and give him
Yeah.
address him how we wanted to and everything like that. So that was very special, and off the back of that. I've got it up here on the wall actually. We got notification that his kidneys actually went to a 60-year-old male who'd been on dialysis for a year and was in very much need. And I said, "What? How does a 9-month-old baby's kidneys
Yeah.
go into a 60-year-old male?" But apparently, and I've been reliably informed that the kidneys grow to suit the size of the person. So
Mm.
we don't know who this guy is. Obviously, he has the option to contact us, but
Yeah.
because we was all over the news, maybe two and two together didn't want, and that's fair enough.
Yeah.
But I'd love to meet him, and if there ever was that possibility. So, yeah, and then obviously, while we were in London, we kind of said we want to keep his name alive. We wanted to do something, so we didn't know what we was going to do at the time. And then I was actually scrolling through messages. Now I had thousands of messages, and that's not an exaggeration either for media. Obviously people had found us on Facebook. They knew
Yeah.
something wasn't right. There was loads of stuff on our local Facebook groups. He swallowed a marble, he choked on apple, and all of it was untrue. But obviously, we couldn't say an absolute thing.
Hmm.
So we then left that to the police. And the police are looking into everything. But we said no media. We're not going to talk to the media, and that was the right thing to do with the police and everything. And then I found a message from a company called Lifevac Europe, and it actually said, condolences, basically, have you seen our product? And I actually replied to the guy and said, "F off."
It's not the time.
It's not the time, it's not the place,
No.
And then it was a couple of months later, we still hadn't got Oliver's body back as of yet. He had to go through a Home Office postmortem, which was then the brain has to come out, all the organs come out, and they all go through testing. So we were still waiting, but then I was looking through and I found as Matt now as you know, I found his message again, and I clicked on the link because I was curious.
Hmm.
And I literally I watched the video on LifeVac and I thought this is it. if we can somehow get these into nurseries, early years childcare settings, that this is going to be amazing. So I messaged Matthew back and said sorry, and we formed this amazing relationship, absolutely amazing relationship. And off the back of that, we became a registered charity
Hmm.
back in February 2023. And yeah, it's just gone amazingly, and I think we've given out 1,080 Lifevacs now. Absolutely incredible.
Incredible.
We both work full-time jobs. The charity's just a side thing for us, and
Yeah.
it's incredible. I think I don't have words for it because I never thought we'd be in this position. So quickly. The
Yeah.
the demand for them is amazing. Like we opened the application process last month, and we budgeted for 40 devices, um, and they went within 22 minutes.
Wow.
And that's and now we're actually going to open today as well this afternoon.
Yeah.
So we've got another 20 to do this afternoon. And yeah, it's kind of just we fear advertising it now because we know they're going to go so quick and no one else gets a look in. But as a charity, we've got to obviously budget our funds, and we've got our own costs, and not we don't pay wages or anything like that, but we've got ground costs, like we've got a storage unit because literally it took over our house, and
Yeah.
so we had to get stuff like that. But it's kind of you never want to open that because you feel so many people are going to be left out because there is that demand. But we have to draw the line somewhere, and as and when we get money from fundraisers, such as yourself for the marathon, we can then give out more devices. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind of a journey, from
Mhm.
utter sadness back in 2021, and then being dragged through the police case and then the inquest, and now the civil case is ongoing. So that's probably not that's going to be another couple of years ongoing. So it's kind of you learn to live with it, but the charity
Mhm.
has literally taken over, and I think that's the most positive thing that it's done for us.
Yeah.
And Ollie's never forgotten. He's on every poster, every little. He's on your T-shirt. While you were
Yeah.
running
His
there.
little smile is always there.
That's
He
it.
saved his first life in that hospital, and the amount of lives that he'll be saving now with these devices.
That's it. That's it.
What was the process like, setting up a charity, sort of, I guess, from that sadness? What was that like?
Probably one of the hardest things we've
Yeah.
done. Purely because we had no idea how to do it.
Yeah. I
The
wouldn't know. I wouldn't know where to begin.
the first thing you do, you look on Google. All the search engines are available and all that. But when we didn't have a clue, we was very fortunate that we had a lady come to us that was following Oliver's case because she's an ex-nursery manager herself, or owner, and now she has a consultancy service where she turns nurseries into charitable organisations.
Hmm.
So she approached us, Sally, bless her, and her business is Dinky Ones, and she said, I want to help you. If you want to set up a charity, I want to help you. So we was very fortunate that Sally came along and basically did all the hard work. She was absolutely amazing. And, it took us best part of a year to get that through to the Charities Commission. They wanted so much detail because we're giving out a medical device. They've got to ensure that that device is safe,
Yeah.
and everything else. And we got through that, and then I think it was the 23rd of February 2023, we got the you are now a charitable organisation, here's your number kind of thing, and off we went, and never looked back really.
No.
It's incredible.
So you say you stock the devices, you've got some in a storage unit ready to go. Is that what you
And
said?
not the devices, so it's everything to do with the charity, so all like the
Yeah.
gazebo and the
Yeah.
prizes, the games and everything. Literally, our conservatory was rammed. And we had to make the decision. We spoke to the trustees and said, look, we've got to get a
Yeah.
storage unit, or some kind of a container or something, because it's just too much to have
Yeah.
in the house,
Yeah.
so we managed to find a company here in Ashford, and they, bless them, they give us a really good discount on a big unit. So everything's now in there now. So it just makes it easy for getting a van. We hire a van in for the events and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's just easy to get a van, go straight up there, load up, take it
Yeah,
back and then take, back into the storage unit when we're done, and then back home. So
absolutely. For
it's
anybody listening who doesn't know about the LifeVac devices, I'd actually heard of them a little bit before I found you guys. Um, so for anyone who doesn't know about the LifeVac devices, can you just briefly explain about them and what they do?
Yeah, sure. So the LifeVac device is a medical device which has been designed by a chap in the States called Arthur Lee. He basically Matt then started Lifevac Europe and then brought it to the UK. So the device itself is an anti-choking device. So it's an airway clearance device which is done by suction. It's non-invasive, so you place it over the nose and mouth like an oxygen mask, and then it's like a push and a pull motion on the bellow, and that generates suction then to basically suck the object out. Um, the device itself is only to be used when first aid has been attempted and failed. That's the important bit for certainly nurseries and everything. You still have to do the first aid first. Once that's failed or they've gone unconscious, then you can grab your LifeVac. And today, it's an amazing bit of kit has saved, globally over 3,800 lives, and I think it's now 1,800 of those lives are children. So and every kit doesn't just cover children, it covers adults as well. So you've got something for everyone in that kit. And I think the best part from LifeVac is if it's used, if you happen to use it, they replace it free of charge. And for us, that's invaluable, certainly for nurseries, because we fundraise them. It costs us about 80 quid to send a device to a nursery.
Hmm.
From the charity's point of view, we don't want them then, if they've used it, you know, to buy another one, because nurseries are already short of money anyway, because
Yeah,
they're massively underfunded for the however many years you look back. So 80 quid is quite a lump of money for them to have, and that's why we thought, if we can fundraise,
yeah,
amazing, let's do it. And just last year alone, we raised. I didn't realize it was so much, but when we had our annual general meeting, the figures came back, and we'd raised over £90,000 last year, which
wow,
was incredible,
yeah,
absolutely incredible. There were some grants in there as well from our local Freemasons and bits and bobs, but the total for the year in our first year was £90,000, and that provided, say 1,080 devices
yeah,
across what started in our hometown of Ashford. We thought we'll do the nurseries and the shower minds and everything in Ashford, and then within, I don't know, it was probably 3 weeks, we had the next Maidstone just down the road knocking on the door saying, "We've heard about these, can you?" And then, like, now we're national.
yeah,
Within 6 months, we had to go national because there was so much interest from all over the UK. I know it's getting a device for free, but having that device to us, it gives someone who's choking another shot at life. I think that the national statistic is, if someone chokes, that could be you, that could be me, that could be a child. They've only got a 70% chance of survival, and that's the national statistic by the Research Council. For every minute that passes, that 70% reduces dramatically.
hmm,
And ambulances in the UK, for example, have an 8-minute target. Well,
yeah,
8 minutes in a choking is too long.
yeah,
But some are quicker, so it's a lot are a lot quicker.
hmm,
Ambulance wise. But in terms of choking, the quicker you can get that out of a person so they can breathe again, it is imperative, and that's where the LifeVac device, steps in, and it's 98.9% effective. That's yeah, that's the official statistic for LifeVac, and we spoke to many insurance companies now, for nurseries and stuff, and they've all said, as long as first aid is carried out first, you can use the device. And
absolutely.
why wouldn't
And
you?
that waiting time for that ambulance, so that's what actually spurred me, I guess, to find you guys. So we had
Mm.
an incident with my son at New Year, and the paramedics were out within 7 minutes.
Mhm.
We'd managed to dislodge what was stuck at the time. But that 7 minute wait, it's just absolutely terrifying. And I
Yeah,
knew that,
I totally agree. I mean, we've actually, obviously, we've got LifeVacs here, left, right, and centre, because
yeah,
we get them in for fundraising and bits and bobs. But we've got a new 2-year-old now, and
mhm,
Jake, and we didn't know at the time, but he suffers from febrile convulsions, which is where
okay,
the temperature goes up too quickly, and then he goes into a seizure. And the first time that happened, it was 4 o'clock in the morning. We were going nuts because we didn't know what was happening. You
Yeah.
know, turns out he had tonsillitis, but we didn't know.
Oh.
And Zoe's on the phone to 999 saying he's fitting, he's not responsive, and then he just went still, and literally the colour just dropped out of him, and he was going grey, and I thought, I'm listening for his airway. I don't know nothing. I didn't know nothing at the time other than really, really basic first aid.
Mhm.
So I didn't know what was going on. But I knew, hang on, his chest's not rising, he's not breathing. And I ran downstairs, I grabbed our life vac off the wall in the kitchen, and I give it placed it on his face, one plunge, and I've never seen so much, stuff come out of a baby.
Yeah.
And it turns out, actually, Zoe was in his room a couple of minutes before, because he'd woken up during the night, and she'd given him Calpol.
Mhm.
So the Calpol went in with a syringe, as you would do with any,
Yeah.
that's the way to do it. And because the airway's like a Y shape in a human, he hadn't swallowed the Calpol. He then gone into the fit. So the actual Calpol was blocking his airway. He couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
So the life vac, so one plunge, and it all came out, and there was a gasp of air, and his colour literally just rose, came back, and
Wow.
I was, oh my, and all this happened within a minute, and then the ambulance was knocking on the door. We was very lucky that night, and he's had another seven, I think seven now since. He's had COVID. He's had more
Oh, bless
tonsillitis.
him.
He's just prone
Yeah.
to it, bless him. But we've never had to use the device again. But that night, I was so thankful
You
we had
hadn't
the
had it
device,
sat
because
there.
if that ambulance had have been longer,
Yeah.
we potentially would have been facing losing our second child in the same circumstance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know what we'd have done then, but thankfully, no damage.
No.
Other than it
Brilliant devices that you're.
turned him into a little terror.
Yes. Yeah, the terrible twos. I don't know if you're going through the same sort of stages
Oh,
as what we are. Oh my word.
yeah, yeah. But that's a whole separate podcast.
It is. Tantrums and independence from toddlers. Yeah, that would make a great podcast.
That's it.
So, we've had a quick chat then obviously about the device and things like that. I think I've seen you do training yourself on those. You go around and show nurseries how to use them properly.
Yep. So I kind of try and stick to Kent, but I have been going a bit further because people have been nervous about using it and
Yeah.
wanting that face-to-face training. So I've always said, if we give a device out, the option is there for face-to-face training. And I think I think it's 320 something nurseries now.
Wow.
In a year. I'm quite fortunate that my employment, I work for myself. I got my own business, so I work for
Mhm.
myself. So I have flexibility to take a day off or move things around. Whereas
Mhm.
Zoe, she works at the fire service, and she's Monday to Friday 8 or 5. So I go out and do the training with the nurseries, and yeah, and we've got some amazing feedback, and
Mm.
generally that develops then into the nursery want to fundraise for more devices for other
Yeah.
people. So that chain of event, that chain there ignites, and we've been very fortunate to be supported, by many nurseries, and not just over in mainland England. Like even Ireland now, he's getting on the ball, and we had I think it was £1,500 from a nursery in Ireland. And that money's ring fenced now for Ireland. So it's an amazing thing, and I smile every time I think about it now, because what we went through on those first few days into what it is now.
Yeah.
I know it doesn't take the fact away that Ollie should be here,
Yeah.
but his legacy is such an amazing thing, and we've been the support we've had from and I'm going to say random people like yourself.
Random
Yeah, yeah.
person.
Do you know what I mean? I remember getting the email or the message through our website or whatever it was that came by email, and I said to Zoe, I said, "Oh, there's a lady from Bath here who wants to, run a half marathon." And she went, "Never." And I says, "Yeah, honestly," and she said, and I remember, I think you said in the email, "I don't know how I'm going to do it. I've got to train for it," and everything like that. And it was just incredible watching your journey, because you made a I can't think of, not a viral thing out of it, but there was sort of constant
Yeah.
updates about
My
your
little
training,
TikTok.
building up to running a half marathon, and I watched it because I thought it was incredible, to see another person that we don't know
Yeah.
that's found us randomly on the internet and wants to do this for us is absolutely incredible.
Yeah. I
You
found you on a Facebook group.
Oh,
So
really? Oh, wow.
yeah, I'm from a town just in Wiltshire, Chippenham, so a little bit outside of Bath. And it was on one of the community Facebook groups, and it was a post
I know
saying,
exactly where it is because I was there the other day, just in the
"Were
lorry.
you? Oh no,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
missed each other."
yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was just a post going up just to let nurseries and childminders know that here was the link you can register
Mhm,
for the devices. And I'd known the name of the Lifevac. I'd seen the devices before from where I'd Googled as to what was out there because it was
mhm.
obviously a bit of a scare in our life as well. Um, and as soon as I saw it, I thought, this is the charity that I link to. I've never had, I knew I wanted to raise money for charities, but I'd not had something that I personally
Mhm.
connected to in the
Yeah,
way that I did with you guys. And my childminder had already seen and she'd already logged herself on there for a device, and
right.
it was
Yeah,
brilliant. Yeah, she's got one.
well, amazing.
Yeah, she
Good,
did. She's
amazing.
got one. Otherwise, I would have messaged you and go, "Can you just like this one?" But no, she got one. And she actually sent me a picture a couple of weeks ago about in the childminding group that she goes through. I don't know if it's an agency through Tiny, childminders, that they're updating for legislation changes coming through in September. So
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about your work in terms of the legislation and sort of the changes and campaigns that you've run.
Yeah, so back in 2022, we started off campaigning about the ratios because the government was going to change for over 2-year-olds, obviously, which wasn't us because Ollie was only 9 months, but we took the safety of children, massively after what had happened to us. So when they were looking at, changing the ratios, we said we want to do it. I mean, Zoe's going to take the credit for this because she said, I want to start a petition. And I said to her, you're never going to get anywhere with it. No one's ever going to listen. And 198,000 signatures later, we got a debate in Parliament, which is one of the most surrealist things I've ever done.
Yeah.
And a quick funny story, but we met up with Neil Leach, who's the CEO of the Early Years Alliance, because he's been a great father figure to us. Honestly,
Hmm.
that man just he's had his own troubled background growing up and everything, and the position he's in now, and he's worked his way through life, is incredible. What he does for the early years sector is phenomenal. And we met up with Neil, and we was walking across. I think it was toward not Tower Bridge, London Bridge, where the Big Ben is, Westminster Bridge,
Yeah.
that's it. And there's all these press reports shouting our names, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? And it was like I think it was Sky News that had tracked us down, wanting to talk about the debate and the petition and everything. And we were stood with all these cameras around us on Westminster Bridge, and there's all these Chinese tourists and other nationalities taking pictures of us, thinking we were someone famous. And I'm just like, honestly, we're not. We're just we're going in there, and we're going to hopefully have a debate about the ratios. And we went and obviously went through security, and we met with a few of the MPs that had been backing the campaign. And then I said, "Oh, is there a toilet nearby?" And I went to the toilet, and Boris Johnson walks in and just has a wee next to me, and I was the most surrealist thing ever.
What an
But
experience.
yeah, yeah, well, we just right, it's kind of. And we went into the debate, and Boris wasn't part of the debate or anything like that. But we went into the debate, and their own consultation that they'd done leading up to this debate said that changing the ratios was going to have a detrimental impact on a child's education, well-being, and safety because it's adding another child. And the awful thing about what they'd done with the ratios is they were proposing. The government or the Department of Education, they were proposing basically to make it not mandatory. So it was up to the settings whether they wanted to introduce the
Yeah.
ratio or not. So basically, they were dangling the rope and saying, if you take it, it's on your head. Thankfully, I've never come across any settings that I've been to that have actually taken it up. They're still 1 in 4. but the option is there to go to 1 in 5, and that puts extra pressure on staff who are already underpaid, undervalued, not by the settings, but I think by the government. That's
Yeah.
my own personal opinion. They're so underfunded, and they're at the end of the day, they're educators. I remember Claire Coutinho, who was the childcare minister at the time when we had the debate in Parliament. She effectively just called them babysitters. And I said, no, these young girls and not well, these ladies as well, you know, they're at a pivotal time in a baby's life because some nurseries around here take babies from 3 months,
Yeah.
and that development stage, is absolutely key and critical. They're not babysitters; they're educators, and they probably have one of the hardest jobs trying to, get a baby to not well to develop
Yeah.
almost, to learn little skills and stuff. And I've got huge admiration for people that work in nurseries, and I think the government should be treating the sector massively differently.
Yeah.
It's massively underfunded, but obviously we had the debate, and we then got a email notification from Rishi Sunak in the January, about a month and a half later, saying basically we're going to scrap the childcare proposed plans. And we thought, amazing, we've won. We've basically hopefully prevented the mental health of staff going nuts because they've got an extra child to deal with. And we know from our own case with Oliver, ratios was a factor in that incident.
Yeah.
So we know that the new ratio wasn't going to work because of our incident.
Wasn't working as it
It
was.
wasn't. It wasn't. Well, the nursery where Oliver choked wasn't in ratio. Let's put it that way. I have to be a little bit careful because we're still going through the civil case.
Yeah.
Um,
And the worry of them then giving childcare settings the choice to, for that to be on their
that's
head if
it.
they're going to
And
go through
it's
that.
pushing the accountability
Yeah.
back onto the sector, back onto the individual settings. And there's no point saying, you can have 5, but if something goes wrong,
Up
we're
to
not.
you.
We told you that it's still 4 in our eyes, but we said you can have 5 if you want it. And that wasn't right. So we did all the press interviews around, and everything like that, saying, but effectively we managed to stop the changes, and we were elated. We thought, we've achieved something amazing here. And then 6 months later, we got 1 day's notice, so we couldn't even fight it. Of the spring, I think was it the spring budget or the autumn budget, whichever one it was. Jeremy Hunt stood up in Parliament and basically said, "We're going to save parents £13 a week by allowing nurseries to be one to go from 1 in 4 to 1 in 5." And our hearts sank because we
Yeah.
just thought, them poor children. If settings do take that up, and again, it wasn't mandatory, it was if you need it, use it kind of thing, or if you want to save the parents the money. But I went onto social media, and I was just, for me, having been through what we've been through, £13 a week, I'd rather them,
Yeah.
I'd rather them, not have not save me £13, knowing my child was 1 in 4 and 1 in 5.
Yeah.
Because it all comes down to, like I say, eating, even playing. Child can have accents when they're playing, so
Mm.
they need their eyes on them, and it's
Absolutely.
got to be 1 in 4. And I think it should be 1 on 1. But
My days at home, I often
yeah,
say to our childminder when I drop him off, I don't know how you do it with more than one, because my day at home with him
I
sometimes I
totally
think,
agree. We have that with Jake
yeah,
here. I totally agree, and I just one's never going to be achievable because there's never going to be the funding there, and that's but that's what my personal opinion what it should be. But I think if 1 in 5 is dangerous because 1 in 4, and the government went all the way across the world. I forget the MP's name now. He went to Switzerland, he went to the Netherlands, all part of this consultation, and they said, well, ours is 1 in 6, and all this lot, but they don't have the same model or the same pay. Like, I mean, statistically, the UK childcare sector is one of the most underfunded in the world by the government.
yeah,
And now they've just found this £27 million or whatever to start their own to put nurseries into schools. Well, why couldn't that 27 million? I know it's not a lot and it's not going to go far, but that 27 million should be putting into the existing childcare settings that are there now to help fund them, and that's what we're working on at the minute. Trying to tackle that. But I think very early on, we went to the DfE and said, look, there has to be change in the childcare settings, and they basically bobbed us off and didn't want to engage and everything. And then once the petition got a bit of momentum, they started to take notice.
Yeah.
And off the back of that, they still didn't listen. They still weren't listening to it. I was fine. I was emailing at 2 o'clock in the morning because I'd been laid in bed thinking, I need to put this to paper. I need to say this. And I was emailing this lady in the DfE, who was the head of the childcare policy, and I was getting massive emails back, and they were very despondent and didn't want to think. And then it was only when it came to Oliver's inquest where we raised our concerns, and we had pages upon pages of concerns. And it wasn't against staff or anything, but it was around protocol around food, around preparation. Oliver was fed penne pasta, which they said was cut up, but from what we've seen, and certainly the videos don't lie, it was consistently, there were big pieces of pasta. So we then obviously put the concerns forward to the coroner. The verdict in the inquest was not what we expected whatsoever. It went down as misadventure, and it was the only verdict that was left to the jury. The whole inquest thing is a whole nother podcast, but it's so unfair.
Yeah.
And we actually felt let down by that inquest, because I didn't realise at the time, but certain things can be blocked from being shown if the defence or they think they've got something that they would show their clients to be in the wrong or go against their statements, etc. And that happened to us. We lost an absolute vital bit of evidence in that inquest, which the coroner had seen, but because the doctor wasn't available to talk about the video, it was blocked from being shown. And that was an absolute pivotal key
Really
bit of
vital.
evidence. And I do believe, it would have changed the outcome of that inquest. So it went down as misadventure. We weren't happy about it, but we didn't get a choice. There's no appeal process, anything like that. So, he died from misadventure. That is what thing, and I think that's so not irrelevant. I don't know what the word is, but underhand, because there was things wrong at the nursery. There was things that weren't done correctly. Training was out and ratios weren't adhered to, and everything like that. But yet, misadventure to me implies that he's walked along a cliff edge and slipped. He
Yeah.
didn't do that. He was 9 months old. He couldn't hold a knife, a spoon, or a fork. He couldn't feed himself, and our baby's choked on. And I will quote the medical doctor who we've got a quote from, said he was fed a significant amount of food inappropriate for his age. And yet, we're back to misadventure. But on the back of that, the coroner, we did ask for what they call future prevention of death notices, which is then sent to the government or sent to whoever. If it had been a driving accident, for example, it would have gone to the DVLA or whatever, Highways Agency. So I always went to the DfE, and it was around food preparation. It was around consistency and textures. And one thing that we were almost broken from was because on the forms, when you go to the nursery, you fill out the initial paperwork and you say my child does this, my child does that. What form of food they're on. There was no box on our forms that said what consistency of food does your child want. So Zoe wrote in one of the boxes, I think it was in the allergy box. Don't know, just starting food. Basically, he was just starting solids.
Yeah.
But we said to the nursery, he's on pureed food. All we want to give him is pureed food. And then 8 weeks later, he died. You
And
know.
that's the thing about, you're sharing it, and this is how I've seen on your Facebook in particular. I can see that you're so open with sharing these sort of details and things. And as a parent myself, that's what I've connected to. You've shared your journey
Mhm.
with as much emotion as any parent would ever feel, going through that situation. Just, I've got my PR hat on now. Let's just talk a little bit about sort of the visibility side of it, because I think you've done such a good job, especially with just a tool like Facebook, to be able to get the message out there. That's how I found you. I know that that's how my childminder um, found you guys. Talk to me a little bit about how you're pushing that message out there and using that to your advantage.
Well, it's funny when we started. We created a logo, yeah, as you do. We
Yeah.
wanted it, and the original logo that we had was just like a green tree with a brown trunk. And the story behind the tree is Oliver was mad for trees.
Oh.
We used to push him along under a tree in his pram, and he would laugh at just leaves blowing in the wind, and so that's where the tree comes from, because we know he was always obsessed with them. So we then started getting things printed. We started getting T-shirts made and bits and bobs. Before the charity was even registered, but we wanted to get that motion in place.
Yeah.
We was putting stuff out on Facebook, and Zoe come to me one night, even though we'd agreed on the logo, well, and she said, it's not cutting it. I just don't like it." And then obviously then I came. I'm the design for the charity. We don't outsource it. I do everything you see from the charity, the videos. It's all me. I do everything. But then I come across, where is it? Other side. It's mirrored. We got our logo.
Yeah.
And then so we changed to the tree with the colours, and I felt then that was the right time to then hit the socials.
Mm-hmm.
I've used Facebook, since pretty much since day one.
Yeah.
Twitter, or X now, I've done quite a bit on there. But I've certainly like Instagram and TikTok, and I have no experience in whatsoever. So it was a learning curve for me. And we just hit the ground running. We put the logo up, and we created an animated one to put on the front of the videos and stuff like that, and it just went mad. And and I was saying to Zoe the other day, I said, I think we've built a brand
Mm-hmm.
with with
Help
the
meaning
with,
to.
with the logo, because, and she
Yeah.
went, no, you haven't built, you don't. It's a charity. I said, yeah, I know, but people see our logo now and associate us with the early years childcare sector.
Yeah.
And there's people out there. I've been I was in a Tesco. I think it was like Haverhill or something up in the north of Essex. And some lady came and said, "Oh, we've got one of your devices," because she's seen the logo on the back of my shirt.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Wow, you actually remember?" And I thought, "Wow, that's amazing." So, social media for us was originally very slow.
Mm.
I'm quite tight, and I refuse to pay for advertising. So I think everything we do has to be pretty much organic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are a few things we spent advertising bits and bobs on, just to test the water to see what the reach is. But some of it's paid off, some of it hasn't. But I think now socials for us is the only way we advertise.
Yeah. And the
Certainly.
local community, I can see that you've sort of built around that. Um, I think it's worth its weight in gold, isn't it?
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
sharing the
So,
message
and
around and
the only thing that for me, the only thing that I think Facebook lacks for me is like the verification side of it, because we were very early on. We were actually uh, we fell victim to a scammer.
okay.
Not us personally, but they
Yeah.
took Oliver's photographs, and we only ever released one photograph from him in hospital, and it's the one where we're holding him. Actually, it was two photographs, because we did one later on, but the one with me holding him, saying goodbye. And I was distraught, I was absolutely distraught. But that photograph then appeared on the Just Giving page, and someone else was saying, "Oh, we're collecting donations for the family and all this lot," and I went nuts,
Mm.
because I just thought, this is absolutely nothing to do with us. We
Yeah.
haven't. approve. No one's come to us and said, "Oh, I want to collect money for you," or anything like that. And it was just, and then we realised the more we thought about it's someone using our photograph to try and earn money.
Yeah.
And I managed to get on Just Giving, and they were actually quite good. And I said, for whatever you do, please return all that money to whoever has donated it. And they promised me that it would. So I've been battling with Facebook. I think we've got 12,000 followers now, and 6,000 likes, page likes, whatever it is. But we still can't get verified as a charity, and that's the only thing that lacks for me. We're verified on Twitter and everything. Facebook actually came to me and gave me a verification for my own personal Facebook page, because apparently I'm a notable person. But they won't do the charity, and I'll be on the charity than on mine.
Yeah.
Put it that way, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
but I think in terms of social is such a good key, and it's free as well. We've managed to create a following now, and we've got people on there that are literally like following us, waiting for us to say devices are available,
open.
come and get an application.
Yeah.
We've got emails. I'm looking at my emails now, and I kid you not, just in April alone, I've probably got 30 plus emails here what say, when is your application process opening? Because people are waiting for the
They
devices,
know and they're waiting.
and
Amazing.
we put one message out there, and it's on our page from
They're
last
gone.
month. We were saying application is now open, and then it's just a flood.
Yeah.
And what we tend to find is, I think our biggest one is we opened it for 100 devices, and we learned a lesson there, because we thought they're not going to go very quickly. We'll have time to get more money in.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen like that. It literally within an hour they'd gone, and we learned a lesson there to be more controlled over funds and stuff. And yeah, so like now we put that thing off, and what we find is it goes to, the last one was Stevenage, a little town near Luton. It gets posted on a Facebook group saying, "Oh, these are been given out free," or whatever, and then all of a sudden we get 20 applications from Stevenage. And we tend to find that they're in groups now. So
Yeah.
we think we never know where
Messages
this
getting
post
out
is.
there in sort of sections when people are sharing the news that they've got it.
Yeah, that's it. And we do feel awful, that we don't have more money,
Yeah.
to give more out. But we've got to keep a reserve. We've got to be sensible. If we don't get any donations or whatever for a year, we've got to have that stability to be able to support the very little outgoings. I think it's about 300 quid a month we've got outgoing as a charity, and that's it. The rest of it, every single penny of it, goes on devices.
Yeah. Oh, well, I've really loved talking to you, Lewis. We could actually probably do a whole other podcast. I've got so many other questions that I could ask you, but we are running out of time today. So if you can just tell people, where can they find you if they want to know more about the charity, if they want to donate, if they want to get involved in some way, how can people find you?
Yeah, so we're obviously on social medias. Most of them are under the Oliver Steeper Foundation, or the username is TOS Foundation UK. Or you can go on our website, which is tosf.org.uk, and you can make donations there. You can purchase devices from there as well, and anyone can buy the device. It's not just for childcare settings. You can have. We've had people buy them, for theme parks, for example. I'm going up to do the training very shortly with a major theme park down here in the southeast. So they've bought them from us, and every kit that is bought from us, we actually do earn a little bit of money on it as well, and that all goes back into the pot to provide more for the childcare sector. So yeah, amazing.
Brilliant. Well, as I say, it's been really lovely talking to you today. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for watching Real PR today with me, Lauren Roberts. It's been great to talk to Lewis, and I'm sure I could go on for hours talking to him about things like this. It's something that I personally am quite passionate about. If you want to find out more about us, it's scottmedia.uk, and you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Lauren Roberts. Thank you so much for watching.